what I usually say that what we do as a team is we enable the flow of talent across ING to
Mm.
make sure we have the right people in the right place at the right time. For example, if we do some sort of effort on the side of recruitment and it improves our employer brand massively, and somehow it becomes way easier for us to hire in certain markets where we're relatively unknown. So what you buy today sometimes is outdated in 12 months' time. And therefore, your most important capital as a bank become that stuff that doesn't depreciate. It's your people.
Mm.
And sometimes you need to make it, well, as simple as that a 5-year-old can understand it, to really make your story land, and also make sure that your story lands time and time and time again, because just mentioning something once will not do anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Leaders in Talent podcast. And for many months, I've been courting Martijn Feikens to be a guest at the podcast. And of course, he said yes quickly, but given the scope and size and responsibility of his work, it took a few months to find the right date. Martijn is the head of global talent operations at ING, is currently responsible for global delivery of recruitment, learning, international mobility, and travel operations, leading an organization that functionally has over 200 employees across the globe, across these different business units, in a global organization of over 65,000 people. Martijn, thank you so much for taking the time to be a guest on this podcast. And to start off, I would really like you to take our listeners to give a little bit of more perspective. What does it mean to be a head of global talent operations at ING, one of the larger banks in the world?
Well, first off, thanks a lot for having me, Adriaan. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
So what's it like? Yeah, that's a good question. And to be honest, one of the largest global banks in the world, I don't think we're that. I think we definitely are one of the largest European banks, but definitely not one of the largest world banks. There are definitely other banks a lot bigger than we are. Though, to be fair, ING does have a balance sheet of over 1,000 billion, which is quite a bit.
Are you facing market volatility, need to hire quickly, or have a team that sits idle? Meet Matcher, your flexible recruitment and sourcing partner. Scale your recruitment capacity up or down without compromising on quality. Trusted by Booking.com, Miro, Heineken, Grammarly, and Deal, Matcher is the RPO disruptor making waves in Europe and the US. For scale-ups and corporates, Matcher covers engineering, go-to-market, and G&A roles. Visit Matcher.io to see how we can support you. That's MATCHR.io.
What's it like? Yeah, so I am responsible for 4 areas that at first sight might not seem so very connected. So it's recruiting, it's learning, it's international mobility, it's travel, and all operations. So at first glance, yeah, you can see recruiting, you can see learning and people development and hiring the right people and making sure that they travel to the right places and do so safely, and also make sure that we have the international opportunities for them, but also for ING to have the best talent in the right place. So what I usually say that what we do as a team is we enable the flow of talent across ING to make sure we have the right people in the right place at the right time.
And what does that look like? Take us into your world, right? Take us into your world, like in terms of the impact, in terms of the size, in terms of the number of hires that you do with your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have to say, even though I am operations, I am of course quite far away from day-to-day practices, and we have lots of teams, and functionally I have lots of teams in the different countries. So ING is active in over 40 countries, some big, some small. And when you look at it from a recruiting point of view, I think in total at ING we have about 150 people working in recruitment. Part of that is external staff because we have a big RPO partnership. part of that is internal people sitting in the countries doing the actual day-to-day work. I'm not really involved in all of that. I am involved, of course, in setting the standards, in providing the direction, sometimes providing some strategic clarity, and providing priorities, what we want to work on. I have very regular catch-ups with all of the recruitment leads in all of the countries. Same, of course, on the learning side, on the international mobility side. Travel a bit less, because travel is more of an area where people can do it themselves. We have a clear booking system, and most of it is more on steering, providing management insights and stuff like that. But it is, of course, a large scope. And ING is a relatively complex organization, relatively, because I can't really compare for the last 9 years anymore to any other organizations. But in my consulting days, I did see quite a few other organizations. And this one does really stand out as complex. And it's due to a few things. So one is, we are a matrix organization. And we're definitely not the only matrix organization. There are many, many more out there. But we sometimes do tend to complicate things, I would say. So in a matrix organization, you have your hierarchical, you have your functional lines. We have that too. So I hierarchically am part of operations, the operations domain. My boss reports into our global COO of ING. Functionally, part of HR. So I have 2 lines in there. But where it gets then a bit more complicated sometimes is when I have colleagues in countries, they usually have those same types of structures. So 1 line hierarchically, 1 line functionally. But then usually there's also a 3rd line in there of reporting to global in some way or form. And sometimes that's a formal line that's drawn on a piece of paper that's in our organizational chart. Sometimes it's informally, like I have in a lot of my parts of the organization. But that then already creates 3 different types of reporting lines. And as you can imagine, it sometimes also creates 3 different types of priorities, and where people are pulling on others to make sure they move in the direction that they want. So that makes it pretty complex. And then the other aspect that makes ING maybe a little bit more complex than some of the other, mainly American banks, is because of what I would say our orange culture, which is a very big positive differentiator, because we generally have a very nice culture to work in. But we're Dutch. Our headquarters is in the Netherlands. And those Dutch roots you can feel quite a bit throughout the organization. It's also due to how ING has grown in the past, through sometimes mergers, acquisitions, buying other companies, but then still having those companies keep quite a bit of autonomy in how they operate. And then also on the Dutch side, we have our polder model, as we call it, where we sometimes try to find a little bit too much consensus before we actually move on. And that is something that we still experience today in the culture, that if there's no clear top-down priority setting and decision-making, then the other way to actually get to decision-making is by getting consensus from all of those different parties in all of those different countries, where one wants to go right and the other wants to go left and the other one wants to go through the middle and the other wants to go backwards. So that makes the operating landscape and getting things done pretty tricky in general.
And this is exactly something I would like to dive a little bit deeper in. I have a background at Unilever, so that's where I started my career. At the time, 120,000 people organization, and also there was a matrix organization. But by definition, the matrix organization, every year, the matrix organization changed with who was reporting to what, and every time they changed the playing field in that way. When you talk about your role with those 4 different business units, with all those different reporting lines, how do you go about setting the agenda for your different teams? How do you actually make sure that things do happen in that consensus type of environment? Tell me a little bit more on what that means for you in your leadership role.
Yeah, so a couple of different things come to mind. So one is always in getting the right priority, but with priority, there also usually comes, both capacity and availability of resources, because I can have whatever priority or proposal or project or whatever I want to do, but in a lot of cases, if I don't have the people, let's say it has an IT angle, which a lot of does these days. If there's no capacity to make any development happen, or if we have, in some cases, 500 other requests for changes in our HR IT systems as well, then it's sometimes really difficult to get that priority. And to actually get it, for me, what I've so far always experienced is to really come to a very clear case of what you are proposing, and then what the benefits are that it's going to bring. And for us, quite often, there needs to be some sort of either cost neutral or financial benefit in order to really make something work.
Yep.
Because if it's not there, then ultimately our cost base increases, and you hope to get some sort of non-financial benefit out. And in some cases, it's worth it. For example, if we do some sort of effort on the side of recruitment and it improves our employer brand massively, and somehow it becomes way easier for us to hire in certain markets where we're relatively unknown.
Yep.
But to actually get to those benefits, that's of course super tricky.
Yep.
So that's always where it starts. And then ideally, we within HR get priority set and get agreement from our global HR management team, who then say, yeah, this is indeed a good idea. We're going to go for this. And this actually becomes a priority. We're also going to communicate it to our sub teams that they actually need to actively work on this. And in some cases, get it also incorporated into their individual targets to really make something happen. If you lack that, then it's basically a best effort thing to try and get people on board for whatever you're trying to achieve, and to have them do that from their own time, from just their a business as usual perspective. And that basically means that we cannot invest any money into anything, but we can still drive improvement. So for example, what probably every single company is doing out there these days is to use Gen AI, whatever LLM, for job descriptions, because usually that thing does a better job than any human does. Exceptions. And that is definitely one of those efforts that you can definitely do without any financial investment, but then to make sure that everybody does it, and to do that at scale. And again, taking the recruitment organization as an example, where there's 150 people, how do you then make sure that all of those 150 do it in that same way, with that same prompt, and make sure that you get the same type of quality? That is sometimes pretty challenging, but still feasible to do in just your BAU time.
And this is such a, just talk me through this particular example, right? Because from the outside, it's like, prompt for a job description, how hard can it be? But
to be honest, this one is pretty easy, because thankfully we do, as every ING employee, we have access to Microsoft Copilot. Anybody can use it. So this was not a super difficult thing to do. But if you talk about any IT solution that needs to be integrated into our IT infrastructure and landscape, then it's a completely different story. Because then what you see is a couple of things. We're in banking. It's a very heavily regulated sector, and way more regulated in the EU than in the US. That's one. Then, because of being the regulated business, we are quite risk averse. And that means that I have to get a lot of different parties involved to get any sort of green light to move ahead with any sort of technology. And then to other things is we, together with a lot of other big global financial institutions, got fined a couple of years back for our failing anti-money laundering practices.
Yep.
And that has basically strengthened that risk culture even further.
Yep.
That while on the one hand, it's in the back of all of our minds as ING employees, because we put a heavy focus on it, and it is a very important point. But at the same time, because it's such a heavy focus on it, it also becomes that any due diligence that we need to do before we can actually move ahead is so heavy that even signing a new contract could sometimes take up to 6 months, start to finish, after we said, yeah, now we want to contract this party. And then 6 months later, we have a signed contract. And then we need to still start implementation. And you can already hear what that then means for throughput times of any new initiative that you want to pursue, because you also very quickly then fall behind of competition sometimes, because some others are able to move more quickly than we are.
Yeah. Hey, and how do you then decide this is worth pursuing, chasing? Because there's new technology constantly, right? Coming up, and like everyone promised one and the other. How do you prioritize what you want to put your name behind and like really drive and get all the stakeholders involved? Like, what's your decision-making framework?
Yeah, that is a tricky one. So I don't really have a clear decision-making framework there.
Yeah.
But I heard this I think nice quote from Josh Bersin a while back at Unleash in Paris, where he said that indeed there's new technology almost every single day, every single week. So what you buy today sometimes is outdated in 12 months' time. And therefore, your most important capital as a bank become that stuff that doesn't depreciate. It's your people.
Mm.
So also there, anything that either helps our people, but to be honest, also sometimes reduces our reliance on people and manual work, that for me always gets priority over the more non-financial or intangible benefits that something brings.
And then from your position, right? Because especially leading such impactful teams, and when you decide on something, this is what we're going to be pursuing, right? You need to get a lot of ducks into the same row. How do you communicate that? Or like what? And I love that you started at the beginning. It's like, how do all of these tie together? It's like we are the talent flow in the organization, and I could immediately visualize that. Is that something that you are constantly doing and reminding people of the work that they do in terms of the vision that you have for the different teams? Tell me a little bit more on how you do that.
I think there's two aspects here. So one is getting all the ducks in a row, and then the other is more the storytelling around any initiative and why it's so important to all get in the same row and also maybe start rowing together. But so if we first get into the different ducks, it really comes back to the risk averseness of our organization. But I know that it's a thing in banking in general, in financial services. So for any new initiative that I will want to pursue, I need a bunch of people and departments. And there's a list basically. So I always need to align with compliance. I always need to make sure that our operational risk management colleagues are involved and sign off. I also always need to make sure that our information risk colleagues are involved. Of course, I do need in case of most IT solutions, I need our IT architects, we need IT risk experts, we need our business control office to be on board, we need our data protection executive, so basically the internal HR party that's executing for data privacy to be fully on board, same for DPOs most obviously, legal, and then once you do most of these checkbox types, then of course we have all of our functional people. So On for example, the learning side of things, we have a lot of people working in learning at ING. And those are, of course, always very important stakeholders to bring along, to take along. And then you get more into your storytelling, into what are you trying to do? How does that make sense for us as ING? How does that make sense for our employees? How it hopefully also makes sense from a financial perspective. And that is sometimes lots of informal coffees and lots of chats to get all of those people on board behind the initiative that you're trying to push or trying to pitch.
So it's first almost like the one-on-ones, the meeting before the meeting, and getting people, okay, they understand, and
definitely. And sometimes it goes almost beyond that. Again, of course, depending on how big the initiative is and how much we want to pursue it. But sometimes you could even say, to make something like that happen, or like that a difficult initiative happen that some people might be against, is to not sit with those people directly, but actually get somebody who is in favor of the initiative, that has a good relationship with the stakeholder that is against it and that has some resistance, to, hey, can you sit with this person together just informally? Can you have coffee? Can you mention this topic to them? Can you mention that it's a good idea? And do like that informal push to actually get your stakeholders moving. And then once they get into a little bit more of an open mindset, and you sit together, and then you can sometimes pitch your idea, and then if you want to be a bit nasty afterwards, you send a recap email saying, hey, we talked about this and that, and then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit formal. But we don't do that last piece too often. It's very easy to make some enemies using that.
No, I can totally understand that. So that's the first part, getting your ducks in a row, right?
Yes.
Let's say, okay, people are aligned in terms of communication, right? And this might, why is this so front and center, is we're scaling rapidly as an organization. And I noticed for me as the CEO and founder of Matcher, is that I actually need to start communicating in a much clearer and consistent way in terms of where are we going. And before that, I could do that one-on-one because of the size of the organization, but now we're passing over the 100 in a very short period of time. And I don't know everyone personally anymore, right? So I really need to make that step. I can only imagine what that must look like for you in your position. And also, if you want to change something, you need to get this massive oil tanker. It's like tiny bit of movement. It can take a long time. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with, for me at least, writing down the ideas and what you're trying to do in a very clear and easy and simple way.
Yeah.
Because if I try to do something, and if I can't get my grandmother behind the idea, what I'm trying to pitch, then what I'm trying to do is just too complicated.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to make it, as simple as that a 5-year-old can understand it. To really make your story land, and also make sure that your story lands time and time again, because just mentioning something once will not do anything. I mean, I took this course in university once on change management, and where there was a quote from John Cotter, where, and here I paraphrase quite loosely, I think, is where he said, if you think you've communicated something enough, then multiply it by 10 times, and then you're close to it. And I sometimes try to apply that consciously as well, to really repeat the same message time and time again, and ideally also reinforce that through other presentations. So for example, we had a team restructuring recently, and after that team restructuring, we did quite a nice exercise to come up with what we now stand for as a team, what do we want to be known for, and I actually came up with a team tagline. So that's for our COO people team, so people operations team basically. And our tagline is to deliver for, or to design for scale, and to deliver with care. And that tagline, for example, is repeated in every single presentation and every single meeting almost that we do. And that really reinforces that thinking, and especially that scalable thinking in lots of people's minds, and hopefully ultimately also in their behaviors. Because like I said at the beginning, a lot of our countries have quite a bit of autonomy.
Yep.
And they sometimes, in decision making, can say, no, I don't want to do this. But by reinforcing that construct of scalability and doing what's best for the company in its entirety, rather what's best for a specific country that has 8,000 people, people need to think what's best for ING and not what's best for our specific group of employees.
Yeah.
And we reinforce that through these types of things by really reinforcing the same message time and time again.
Hey, and Martijn, is that when you sit down with your team, is it you then leading that workshop and like getting to this tagline? Do you have an external trainer? Is your team leading that? How do you get this outcome?
Yeah, this was done by a lot of external facilitation.
Yeah.
So external being two parts. So external from the team. So we have some actual consulting teams within ING that help parts of the organization that go through reorganizations and stuff to come up with stronger new organizations than that they went into, but also indeed external help from more coaching type profiles and leadership type coaches that help us through the transition and to really reinforce the thinking and reinforce the messaging and stuff like that.
Is this something that you also do looking forward for 2026? That you have like a theme, or that you communicate like, hey, this is what we want to achieve in 2026?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say so concretely on what we want to achieve in 2026, but we have set for our bigger people operations team some very clear objectives, and we've come up with 5 clear OKRs. That we want to be working on, and that we also have clearly defined results for in 2026. So we do something to elevate employee experience. We do something to empower data-driven decisions, because we as HR, we're sitting on a lot of people data, and we also have pretty good dashboards in making that data available, not just to HRBPs, but also to our line managers. And then now we need to make sure that the decision making is based on that data. Then we have a third one that's on designing for both global and local, and to deliver for scale, so that any new initiative that we do is actually scalable across all of our countries and across all of our employees. We have something focused on making sure that everybody grows and learns and develops themselves, and that there's also a real focus on it. And lastly, and this won't surprise you, it's about being compliant and about being effective, to make sure that we don't run any major risks and stuff like that.
I love how you just were able to articulate all 5 of them without blinking. Is this something for you as a leader? Do you constantly hammer this down with your team and with your direct reports? Did you sit down, or like how do you go about of inspiring that messaging, but also to keep clear on like what are our most important OKRs? Yeah.
So what we do is anything new that we propose. So now we're indeed going to set the priorities for 2026. We've kind of set them already, but every single one of those priorities is linked back to one of those 5 OKRs. So that later on we can also structure and show everything that we're doing and how it leads back to our overarching objectives, and how that's hopefully going to lead to results as well later on down the line. And
how do you do that in your one-on-one? Because the people that report to you, those are managers, right? They manage team. Like you're quite far removed from actually the day-to-day recruitment or the actual learning and development training, etc. So what are the conversations that you're having with the people reporting directly to you?
It's usually about this type of structured thinking. In general, I don't think people need a lot of hand-holding, but where I usually can help a little bit further is indeed in making sure that whatever we do is very clearly structured, or also what we propose to do, is very clearly structured, and not only to those objectives and how they lead to results, as I just mentioned, but that for every single thing that we come up with or good idea that we have, is that we have the idea, that we have it super clear on what we want to do with the idea, but then also what the impact it should have and what business outcomes ultimately that idea should have. So if you do it that way, and ideally you structure it even further, you can always trace it back to, I'm doing this because in 10 steps, it's going to lead to this and this business outcome. And that's where I try to help.
Martijn, for you, right? Because maybe some of our listeners are like, oh my goodness, it takes 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 months before, a little piece of technology is implemented. Like this sounds way too slow and not exciting at all. What is the excitement, about your role, the work, the size? Tell us a little bit more about that other side of the story.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and you could also rephrase it into what's actually now keeping you in that job. And to be honest, it's while things indeed don't move very quickly, it's usually the things that we do very well. And that is one thing that I quite like. Of course, you do need to like the whole stakeholder management piece, because if you don't, then you're really not going to thrive here, or at least not in some of the more senior roles where you really need to do some very careful and clear stakeholder management. But if I talk for me personally, what's keeping me here is that we can still, and we continue to do, we can still always improve. And we can always solve some new challenge, and we always have some new problem to fix. And that is what I enjoy, and to ideally also structure behind or along with it, and make sure that whatever we come up with is something that really works, that we implement really well, and that it actually delivers the results that we had envisioned at the start.
Martijn, have you always been a good stakeholder manager? Has it something that you've grown into over time? And for people that are on that journey, do you have some things that have worked well for you in the past?
Good question. I think the answer can only be no. I don't think you can ever be a very good stakeholder management from
says the head of global talent operations at ING. Yeah, go on.
But you learn, right? I mean, it's a skill that you need to practice and that you need to develop. It's the same as presenting to a big audience. I mean, I'm naturally a relatively introverted type. I can still do a pretty good presentation, not because I like to do it, but because I've practiced it so many times. And when you practice, you become good at it. And once you become good at it, something also starts to become enjoyable. And that's also the case here with stakeholder management. And what I personally always try to approach, and actually that happens also here in the house and in our household, is and my wife is a clinical psychologist, but it's the reverse psychology. I mean, sometimes I screw something up and my wife asks, so if it were the other way around, how would you feel about it? And actually applying that same type of thinking, that same type of perspective for stakeholder management works exactly the same way. So if I'm, for example, I try to push a new learning solution from global to some country. And if I then sometimes put myself in their shoes, or try to for as much as possible, and I think, oh, here's that guy again, coming from the global headquarters, from the ivory tower, saying, we need to do this. Why the hell would I do this? How does this benefit me? And doing that type of structured thinking ahead of time, and to have a clear story on how it benefits them, then you can get into some good conversations and hopefully actually get to whatever they're concerned or worried about, or what they like, what they don't like.
To make it all about them, what's in it for them, understand what their needs and wants are, and see if you can take them on that journey.
Yeah, and of course, always reinforcing that message on what is in the best interest for the company as a whole.
and as a company as a whole, because that sometimes needs to mean that they need to work with something that might not work
Yes,
work for them.
100%. I mean, at the moment we've done a big Workday rollout in the last couple of years. So almost all of our countries at the moment are on Workday. We're really starting to see the benefits for that, because everybody's same system, all data in the same place, etc., etc. But for example, we're doing another implementation at the moment for another country, where they currently have a custom ATS, applicant tracking system.
Yeah.
So they need to say goodbye to something that was custom built for them, that really works the exact way that they like to work, and now need to get on board to some global standard that in the grander scheme of things makes sense. But for them specifically, for that country, it can feel as a big step back.
Yeah.
And then indeed you need to sometimes just convince that it will make sense, and maybe not in 6 months time, but it will make sense in a year from now. And ultimately, even though from that specific part it might be a step back for you, but if you look at the whole, it's going to be a big improvement for that country specifically.
And is there sometimes also, sorry, this just has to happen, and
Definitely. That sometimes also happen. We Look, we always try to have a good eye for local nuances, and definitely, of course, for local regulations, local legal constraints, any local laws. But if that's not applicable, we do definitely try to be sometimes a bit more flexible in what local needs are, or if you have any local market circumstances, stuff like that. But sometimes it's also, this is just how it works, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Martijn, you are a couple of hours away from your Christmas break as we are recording this podcast. Anything in particular for 2026 that stands out that you're excited about looking forward?
Oh yeah, that's a tricky question. I am very much looking forward to see how we can further help our employees develop themselves, and to stay relevant in the market, in the labor market in general. I mean, we talked very briefly on technology moving super fast these days, though to be very honest, I think technology has always moved relatively fast, and change was a constant. But to really help and give our employees the tools to really develop themselves, but hopefully also instill that mindset throughout the bigger business, and maybe sometimes also a little bit with our senior management, that this is important and has become even more important in the future. And to requote Josh Bershon again, people are your most important part of your capital, and they are something that will never depreciate.
Yeah. And also, to quote Alex Hormozi, the investment on human capital is the biggest investment that you can do in terms of the bang for your buck, if you look at it that way. So I fully agree. Martijn, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and sharing a little bit more about what your world looks like. I find it absolutely fascinating. I remember a couple months ago when we spoke at a leadership event, and some of our partners presented different technology solutions, and you were speaking to them. It's like, okay, but like how does this really drive efficiencies and costs, and it all looks nice. And then and that was the moment that I was like, I want to have you on as a guest on the podcast, because you explained, it's like, if we go for something, it's going to take so much work in order to get something implemented. So I really need to know what this looks like. And you also ask all of our other senior leaders that were at the event. So, but what is everyone really doing at scale, right? And it was, I loved it, because you were really probing, and then what you see quite quickly, the all shiny, presentations, and also like what some of the other people that are doing is saying, we're doing everything with AI. It's actually very minimum.
Yeah, indeed. If you start to probe, then the actual scalability part of it is sometimes a bit lacking.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot for having me on the show, Adrian.
Awesome.